Welcome back. Tonight, we return to the deep forests of ancient Greece, where the boundary between mortal and divine was as thin as morning mist, and where a single moment of transgression could seal a fate more terrible than death itself. The question we ask tonight is this: when does an accident become an unforgivable crime? When Actaeon stumbled into that hidden grove on Mount Cithaeron, he was simply a young hunter who had wandered too far. He sought nothing more than cool water on a hot afternoon. He had no dark intention. No malice lived in his heart. And yet, by the time the sun had set that day, Actaeon would be gone from the world of men forever, torn apart by the very hounds he had trained and loved. The goddess Artemis saw to that. She who protected the innocent, she who safeguarded the wild places, she who valued purity above all things, showed him no mercy whatsoever. Was her punishment just? Or does this myth reveal something darker about the nature of divine power, about the price mortals pay simply for existing in a world ruled by gods? Let us return to that distant summer, to the mountain slopes of Boeotia, and discover why Artemis the hunter never forgave Actaeon. The region of Boeotia in central Greece was a land of contrasts. To the south lay fertile plains where wheat grew golden under the Mediterranean sun, where farmers guided ox-drawn plows through rich dark soil, where olive groves stretched in silver-green rows toward distant hills. But northward rose the mountains, wild and ancient, clothed in dense forests of oak and pine. Mount Cithaeron loomed highest among them, its slopes thick with shadow even at midday, its ravines cutting deep into stone that had stood since the world was young. Here, civilization gave way to wilderness. Here, the gods still walked. Farmers who lived in the foothills knew better than to venture too deep into those woods. They made offerings at the forest edge, poured wine onto the earth, left honeycakes on flat stones, and whispered prayers to Artemis, asking permission before they gathered firewood or set their snares for rabbits. They understood that these mountains belonged to her, that mortal feet trod on sacred ground, that respect and caution were not merely virtues but necessities for survival. The air in those high forests carried a different quality than the air of the lowlands. It was cooler, damper, scented with moss and cedar and the mineral tang of stone springs. Shafts of sunlight fell through the canopy in pale columns, illuminating drifting seeds and drowsy insects. Birds called from hidden branches. Deer moved like ghosts between the trees, their steps soundless on the carpet of fallen needles. And everywhere, always, there was the sense of being watched, of standing in a sanctuary older and deeper than any temple built by human hands. In these mountains, there lived a young man named Actaeon. He was the grandson of Cadmus, founder of Thebes, and his bloodline carried both distinction and burden. But Actaeon did not concern himself much with matters of dynasty or politics. His passion, his purpose, his joy in life was the hunt. From boyhood, he had trained in the arts of tracking and stalking. He could read the forest floor like a scholar reads a scroll, interpreting every bent blade of grass, every partial print in soft earth, every scrape of antler on bark. He knew the habits of boar and deer, the territories of wolves, the hidden trails that wound through the thickest underbrush. He kept a pack of hunting dogs, 50 of them, each one bred and trained to perfection. He knew them all by name. There was Melampus, the swiftest, black as midnight with a white star on his chest. There was Ichnebates, the tracker, who could follow a day-old scent through running water. There was Pamphagos, fierce and loyal, who had saved Actaeon's life once when a wounded boar had turned to charge. These hounds were not merely his tools. They were his companions, his family. He fed them from his own hand, spoke to them in the evenings, slept among them under the stars when the hunt took him far from home. If you had asked Actaeon to describe himself, he would have said he was devout. He honored the gods. Before every hunt he made offerings to Artemis, burning fat and meat on a stone altar his grandfather had built generations before. He took only what the forest could spare. He wasted nothing. He killed cleanly, and he gave thanks for every life that fed his household. He believed himself to be in harmony with the goddess whose domain he shared. He did not understand that devotion alone is not enough, that proximity to the divine is not safety but danger, that the gods do not want our friendship. They want our fear, our distance, our absolute subordination. This Actaeon had yet to learn. The day it happened was ordinary in every way. It was high summer, the season when heat hung heavy even in the mountains, when the air shimmered above the rocks and even the shade offered little relief. Actaeon had risen before dawn, gathered his companions, both human and canine, and ventured deep into the forest to hunt deer. The morning had gone well. They had tracked a stag for hours, a magnificent creature with a 12-point rack, and brought it down with a clean spear throw. The work of field dressing the animal was completed. The meat was packed for transport. The heat of the day was upon them. Actaeon dismissed his companions, told them to return to the city with the kill. He would follow later, he said. He wanted to explore a ravine he had noticed, a fold in the mountain he had not visited before. His friends warned him, gently, that it was unwise to wander alone in the deep forest. But Actaeon was confident, strong, unafraid. He had walked these mountains his entire life. What did he have to fear? So he set off alone, leaving even his beloved hounds behind, following a narrow trail that switched back down into shadow. The ravine was steep-sided, its walls clothed in ferns and trailing ivy. A stream ran along its bottom, clear and cold, bubbling over smooth stones. The sound of the water was the only sound. Even the birds seemed to have fallen silent. Actaeon followed the stream deeper into the ravine. The air grew cooler with each step. The sunlight, which had been oppressive on the higher slopes, barely penetrated here. He felt relief at first, grateful for the shade and the proximity of cold water. He knelt beside the stream, cupped his hands, drank deeply. The water tasted of stone and snow, pure and ancient. Then he noticed the trees. They were different here, older, larger. Their trunks were thick as houses, their bark silver with age. And they grew in a pattern, not random but deliberate, forming a natural colonnade that drew the eye towards something deeper in the ravine. A grove, a clearing. Curiosity pulled him forward. He rose and walked toward the grove, moving quietly out of habit, his hunter's instincts making each footfall silent. He pushed aside a curtain of willow branches and stepped into the clearing beyond. What he saw there stopped his breath. The grove was circular, ringed by ancient oaks whose branches wove together overhead like cathedral vaulting. In the center of the grove was a pool, fed by a waterfall that tumbled from a crack in the stone cliff face. The water of the pool was impossibly clear, so transparent that every pebble on its bottom seemed magnified and close. Steam rose from its surface, though the air was cool, suggesting the water was fed by a hot spring deep within the mountain. Moss covered the rocks around the pool in thick cushions of emerald green. Flowers grew here that Actaeon had never seen before, white and luminous, filling the air with a scent like honey and almonds. And in the pool, bathing in the crystal water, was Artemis. The goddess stood waist-deep in the spring, her back to him, her long dark hair unbound and wet, streaming down her spine. Her skin glowed with a light that had nothing to do with the filtered sunlight. She was attended by her nymphs, a dozen of them, daughters of rivers and mountains, who poured water over her shoulders from silver ewers, who combed her hair with ivory combs, who sang in voices too beautiful for mortal hearing. Actaeon froze. His mind went blank with shock, then flooded with horror as he realized where he was, what he was seeing. This was a sacred place, a bathing place, a sanctuary where no mortal man was ever meant to set foot. He had not sought this. He had not intended this. But intention did not matter. He was here. He was seeing what no man was permitted to see. The goddess, unveiled. The goddess, vulnerable. The goddess in her most private moment. He did not stare. He did not leer. Later in the stories, some would claim he had boasted of seeing her naked or that he had tried to force himself upon her. These were lies, additions made by those who needed to justify what came next. The truth was simpler and more terrible. Actaeon simply stood there, paralyzed by shock and fear, unable to move, unable to look away, unable to undo what had already been done. One of the nymphs turned, saw him. Her song became a shriek. Artemis turned then, her silver eyes finding him instantly across the grove. For a moment that stretched into forever, goddess and mortal stared at each other. Her face showed no expression at first, no anger, no fear, no shame. Just a cold, infinite assessment, the look a human might give an insect before crushing it beneath a heel. Then her hand moved. She reached toward the pool's surface, scooped up a handful of water and flung it toward him in a single fluid motion. The droplets hung in the air, catching the light, turning to diamond, to crystal, to something that was not water at all but pure divine power, cold and merciless and absolute. They struck Actaeon's face. They struck his chest. They soaked into his skin, into his blood, into the very essence of what he was. The pain began immediately. His hands twisted, fingers curling into claws. His spine bent, vertebrae popping and reshaping. His jaw extended, teeth lengthening into fangs. Antlers erupted from his skull, blood streaming down his face. His scream of agony came out as a stag's cry, high and desperate and utterly inhuman. Fur sprouted across his skin, his legs reshaped, bones breaking and reforming. Within moments, Actaeon the hunter was gone. In his place stood a stag, magnificent and trembling, with fear-wide eyes that still held human understanding. Artemis spoke then, her voice carrying across the grove like winter wind. "You have seen what mortals must not see. You will tell no one, and you will learn in your final moments what it means to be prey." Then she whistled. It was a sharp, clear sound that carried out of the ravine across the mountain to where Actaeon's 50 hounds waited with his companions at the forest edge. The dogs heard their master's call, or what they thought was their master's call. They broke free from the men who held them, a flood of muscle and tooth and loyalty, racing back into the forest to find Actaeon, to answer his summons, to do what they had been trained all their lives to do: hunt. Actaeon heard them coming. The stag that had been a man bolted from the grove, instinct overriding the human mind that still struggled inside the animal body. He ran through the forest, leaping over fallen logs, crashing through underbrush, his new body faster and stronger than his human form had ever been. But it was not fast enough. Nothing could be fast enough. Melampus reached him first, the black hound he had raised from a pup, trained with patience and love, fed from his own hand every day for 10 years. Melampus did not recognize him, could not recognize him, saw only a stag, wounded, terrified, perfect prey. The hound's jaws closed on the stag's haunch. Actaeon tried to cry out, tried to make them understand, tried to speak their names. But the sounds that came from his throat were only animal bleats, meaningless to the pack that had once loved him. Then Icnobates was there. Then Pamphagos. Then all 50 hounds, a writhing mass of fur and fury, pulling him down, tearing at him, doing what he had trained them to do with perfect efficiency and devotion. Actaeon felt every wound. The human consciousness trapped inside the dying stag body experienced it all. The pain, the betrayal, the bitter irony of being killed by those he had loved most, and above it all, the knowledge that this was not accident, not misfortune, but punishment. Divine, deliberate, merciless punishment for a crime he had not intended to commit. His companions found him minutes later, drawn by the sounds of the kill. They discovered the dogs standing over the body of a magnificent stag, their muzzles red, their tails wagging with the pride of a successful hunt. Of Actaeon there was no sign. He was simply gone, vanished into the forest. They called for him. They searched. They found nothing. They returned to Thebes with the strange story of a hunter who had disappeared and a stag that had appeared from nowhere, almost as if by divine intervention. Only the blind prophet Tyreges, when he heard the tale, understood what had truly happened. He told Actaeon's family the truth, and the truth brought no comfort. Actaeon's mother wept. His grandfather Cadmus, who had seen so much divine cruelty in his long life, only nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting something like this all along. The family built a tomb for Actaeon, though they had no body to bury. They made offerings to Artemis, begging for her forgiveness, though she had already taken everything she wanted. The hounds, who had killed their master without knowing it, became strange after that day. They refused to hunt. They howled at night, a mournful sound that carried across Thebes and made mothers hold their children close. One by one, they wandered off into the mountains, returning to the wild places, and were never seen again. Some say they still roam Mount Cithaeron, ghost dogs searching eternally for the master they killed, trying to undo what cannot be undone. The grove where Artemis had bathed became a place of pilgrimage and fear. Hunters left offerings there, but they never entered. They stood at the edge at the curtain of willow branches and left their gifts of wine and meat and flowers, and then they backed away quickly, eyes lowered, afraid that even looking at the sacred pool might bring down the goddess's wrath. The grove remained forever after a reminder that the gods do not forgive trespass, no matter how accidental. That divine law is not tempered by mercy or context or human understanding. That a single moment of being in the wrong place can erase a lifetime of devotion. Artemis never spoke of Actaeon again. She continued her eternal hunting through the wild places of the world. Virgin goddess, protector of the young, guardian of boundaries that must not be crossed. If she felt any regret for what she had done, no myth records it. If she ever wondered whether her punishment had been proportional to his crime, no story tells us. She is the goddess. She is justice itself. And justice in the world of the gods is not what mortals hope it to be. It is simply power, exercised without hesitation, without doubt, without the weakness of compassion. And so the myth of Actaeon comes down to us across 3,000 years, a story that asks us to consider what we mean by justice, by guilt, by the price of transgression. Was Actaeon responsible for stumbling into that grove? Should he have been more careful, more aware, more respectful of the boundaries between mortal and divine? Or was he simply unlucky, a good man caught in circumstances beyond his control, punished for an accident as if it were a deliberate crime? The Greeks who told this story did not answer these questions. They simply told the tale and left us to wrestle with its implications. Perhaps that is the real lesson. Not that the gods are just or unjust, merciful or cruel, but that they are simply other. That divine nature operates by rules we cannot fully understand, driven by priorities we cannot share. That the best we can do is honor them, fear them, and stay as far from their notice as possible. Because proximity to the divine is not blessing but danger, and the gods, when offended, do not forgive. Thank you for listening tonight. Next time, we'll journey to a different mountain, in a different land, where another hero will learn a different lesson about the price of pride and the nature of divine power. We'll explore the myth of Arachne, the weaver who challenged a goddess to a contest of skill, and discovered too late that even perfect talent cannot protect a mortal from immortal jealousy. Until then, rest well. Let these old stories settle into your thoughts like stones sinking through dark water, and remember that even in sleep, even in dreams, we are always walking through territories not entirely our own. Good night.